Hey everyone! Welcome to Bookends of Recovery, where recovery gets real and loved ones aren't left out. I'm Laura, and I've lived it. I've used, I've healed, and I have loved someone through their addiction and their recovery. When I first got clean, I thought, not using was, well, there was to it. Pretty much mission accomplished. Like maybe someone's gonna throw me a parade or, get a gold star, or whatever. Of course, that didn't happen. But the mental health aspect was not even on my radar. Like that came much later, like a decade, actually longer than a decade, after my husband's disclosure of his own addiction. But the cool thing is that you can find your own mental health and emotional sobriety at any time. So if that's kind of where you are, that's what we're going to talk about today. How emotional sobriety and mental health kind of tie in together. So if you're not familiar with emotional sobriety, which is one of my favorite topics, probably because I was so bad at it, so I love to share it so that you can avoid being, like, what do you mean emotional sobriety? Like I was. And I didn't hear about it. The only reason I knew was because I started going to AA, and my sponsor told me about it. And I was getting ready to, leave the rooms of AA because, I felt that I had gotten as much as I could from there. And I was just exploring different recovery opportunities. And she was like, wait, let's talk about this. And I was like, okay, cool. And because I, gone through my 12 steps and did deep dives with another sponsor and then with her. And she's like, let's just talk about this. And so I stuck around for that. And I was like, damn, I'm so glad I did. But yeah, she was my saving grace in there. But yeah, so in simple terms, emotional sobriety means you're no longer letting your emotions take the wheel and, just like drive you into a brick wall. And you're not avoiding your emotions or, just drowning in them and spiraling out. You're learning to feel them, just fully without letting them hijack your healing or your recovery, your day, your relationships. You're just really feeling the feels, as they say, or used to say. I'm old. But so mental health and recovery and your emotional sobriety all go hand in hand, because really one without the other is kind of like, I don't know, peanut butter without the jelly. You're like, sure, it's still tasty, but having that jelly just makes it so much better. And besides, like, peanut butter is like really hard to eat, right? Without the jelly. I was gonna say liver and onions without bacon, but I realized most people don't like liver and onions as much as I do. I'm just kind of strange like that. But here's how they kind of all connect, right? So it's regulation over reaction. So emotional sobriety helps you pause and choose how you respond. So you get to have your mental health tools like CBT or DBT, or even that deep breathing that I'm constantly talking about. And it gives you the how behind the pause. And then you also have an awareness without shame. So you can feel anxious and sad, or even just feelings of rage without turning on yourself or others. That's emotional growth and mental wellness, because you're allowed to feel those feelings and process them. And when you process them, you do that without spiraling. You stop avoiding the things that are challenging, and you start allowing yourself to move through it without losing yourself in those moments. And obviously, I didn't learn this in like a single therapy session, or, going to one support group. It took time unlearning unhealthy thought patterns, creating those new pathways for my brain to travel on, crying in my car. I've talked before about how I had that favorite spot to park in and just journal it out and cry, and then shred that piece of paper and throw it in the garbage on my way out. And I even cried at work. So it was a process. But I was learning how to let myself feel emotions that I had mentally, and I had an image in my head. You guys know I'm a very mentally imaged person. Like, if I can create an image in my head, I'm going to do it. And for me, I had physically put a mental image of a door, and with a lock and a key and everything, and just shoved that all those memories and abuse and all that, and just locked it behind a door. And so I was learning to let that door open just a little bit at a time, and each memory that came through, I would allow it to come, and I would let it, just slowly come through, and I would let myself sit with it and feel whatever came through, and I would let that emotion come. And in the beginning, I didn't know what that emotion was, because I never allowed myself to feel it. So obviously anger was the first thing, because that's easy to identify, but then I would really think about it, and it was be like, oh, you know what? I was actually scared, or I was not just angry, but saddened because no one was protecting me in that moment, or whatever. And so learning how to feel my emotions without numbing, shoving them down, locking them behind that door, or even snapping, that all takes time. But eventually things leveled out, and that chaos that was constantly in my brain that caused me to try to control everything else, because I've talked before about my need for control, and just that detail of, trying to organize everything and put it in a nice neat box. It calmed. And I was at a point where it was like, wait a minute, I can actually sit with my thoughts. And I'll be doing a Substack article on my adoption process. I just got some information, and so I'm going to share, like, because on Substack I do like real personal stuff. And so over there I'll share my thoughts on that. But had I not been emotionally sober, it would have crushed me. But I had to sit through it yesterday, and yeah, it was pretty emotional. But so yeah, because they unlocked the records in my state where I was born, And so I got my information yesterday. So that was, pretty wild. But yeah, so being able to sit inside your own stuff is just so cool, and not have that chaos in my brain. It's like, wow, I can sit here and be comfortable in my own brain and then eventually be comfortable in my own skin. I love it. Um, and so the more I worked on, not just in support groups, not just with my therapist, but even just at home, just constantly working on that. I hope you guys can't hear my shark emptying the canister. If you can, I'm so sorry. So, as I'm saying this, you're probably like, well, that's great for you, but what am I supposed to do, right? um, you're like, where do I start? Good question. I'm glad you asked. uh, just remember that wherever you are in your journey, you're exactly where you need to be. Because the truth is, it took me far longer to reach where I needed to be because I wasn't willing to dig in. I was so scared of remembering all those things, the trauma, and reliving it. And there are some things that I talked to my counselor about, and then, she asked, do you want to dig deeper and stuff? And I was like, no, I don't. Like, I just don't want to look at that. And she was like, okay, that's fine. You don't have to. But then there was other stuff that I was like, yeah, let's go through this. So you do what you're comfortable with and think about where you want to start your healing. Reach out to a support group, reach out to a professional. And you don't have to have it all figured out right now to start healing. You just need one small, consistent action. So let's talk about like some of those few jumping off points if you're starting at the um, beginning and you're just like, okay, great, mental wellness, what does that mean, right? Because sometimes you're just like, I don't even know what that means, kind of like I was with like emotional sobriety. I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. So before you get too bogged down, yes, there's a workbook on my blog. It's called the Emotional Sobriety Companion Workbook, so you can look for that. And so let's just start with something simple. You can pick one emotion a day. So start by naming it. Name what you feel once a day. And if you're struggling with naming emotions, start with the simple ones, right? So just start with the basic, happy, sad, angry, lonely, whatever. And then as you're learning more, you can just Google the emotions wheel, and then you'll see all the different ones and how they go, how they go down. Or you can go on my blog, and I have emotions. Just get go on my blog and search emotions, and you'll see it on there as well, and how the emotional levels are. But set a timer or just check in with yourself before your feet hit the floor or before you go to bed, and check in with how you're feeling. You can even say, acknowledge it, like, I am grateful this morning, or I felt angry this morning, or I felt proud that afternoon, or after that meeting, something like that. You don't need to do a deep analysis, just practice noticing. And like I said, stick with the basics. There's also an exercise on my website called Emotions with Color, and that can help you also identify emotions if that's something that you're struggling with. Another thing that you can try is practicing the pause so that you don't have to fix or figure out your emotions right away. So you can try doing something like if something is starting to stir you up, right? Just take 10 seconds. That's all. Just 10 seconds to breathe before reacting. Or if you're already good at, doing your breathing exercises, right? You can do your box breathing or just deep belly breaths and let that kick in. And that gives you time to pause. And that is you learning to respond rather than react. Because when you do that, you're causing an interruption and you're giving yourself time to come into the present and ground yourself. Something else you can try is writing like a little wins list. It doesn't matter how big or how small, but just, put something like, how everyone always talks about doing like a 5-year plan. Don't worry about that. Let that go. Think about something that you did today that moved you toward your emotional sobriety or toward your mental health. Maybe you took a walk. Maybe you were really good about hydrating today. Maybe you reached for an apple instead of a candy bar. Maybe you didn't hit the snooze button this morning. Maybe you went ahead and did the affirmations this morning, or before you went to bed or something. Celebrate that and write it down, because when you write these things down, and when I say write it down, you can also put it in your notes on your phone. You're validating the fact that you are continuing to work on yourself. And that list is so much more important than any to-do list, right? And I'm not saying goals aren't important, because they are, but so is celebrating your wins. All of them, even those small ones. Because the more you see how much you're accomplishing, the more you get motivated to keep doing it. And of course, like I said, find your people, find a trusted outlet. It's, your therapist, a support group, a recovery friend. You want people who are going to love you through your healing, through your recovery. Be there when you need to celebrate. Be there when you need uplifting, right? Of course, in those tough moments when you need to get something out, go ahead and journal it. But just have one space where you can show up honestly and without shame. You don't need to pour your soul out every single day, but knowing you have somewhere to go makes such a difference in your recovery and your healing journey. So if you're not sure where to begin, you can start at look at my resource hub on my website. I also have journaling stuff on there. So just go ahead and check those out. But you can try, if you don't feel like looking right now, you can try saying, jotting down something like, today I felt blank because blank. Or right now I need blank. Or I usually avoid feeling blank, but today I noticed it. So that's a good way to get you started. And don't make the mistake that I did, please. Like, seriously, don't go alone. Don't try to think that you don't need anybody, you don't need support, because I tried it and it sucked. I made things so much worse. Whether it's a community or online support, a workbook, just following people who have been there, done that, and got the t-shirt, it really does make a difference in your healing and in your recovery. There is no shame in needing help or a guide, like most of us do. And let's normalize a few things that just don't get enough credit. Like, if you set a boundary and didn't spend like the next 12 hours overthinking it, like, that's a great thing, right? Or you had a tough day and didn't immediately reach out for your coping mechanisms, this is something worthy of celebration. Or if you felt your feelings and didn't shame yourself for having them, again, this is another win. Or you chose a healthy pathway over a negative pathway, write that on your list. Or you noticed a negative thought and you were able to reframe it to something positive. Again, this isn't just a small win, this is like gold star. Or if you asked for help, even if your voice was like, oh my God, I need your help. This is amazing. This is progress. That's your mental health in action. And I know, I get it. Sometimes it's hard to know when you need support. Are you just having a rough week? Or is your mental health, something that you need more attention? So let's talk about some signs that you might want to check in with a professional. We've talked about like that flat line, where it's almost like you're feeling that plateau. But if you're feeling emotionally flatlined or hyper reactive more days than not, that's a sign. Or if you're feeling that you just can't sleep, sleep is impossible, or that's the only thing you can do, like you just cannot get out of bed, that may be a good time to reach out to a professional. Or if you're isolating and not in a way that is protecting your peace, but out of hopelessness or fear, pick up that phone and talk to somebody. Don't forget about the 741-741 free crisis line. And then if you find yourself saying, I'm fine, but inside you're not okay, reach out. There is no shame in needing therapy or meds or both. I mean, how many times have you heard me talk about my counselor? She absolutely rocked. I wouldn't be where I am today without her. If you need a therapist, find one, please. If they're out of your budget, see if there's one in your area that works on a sliding scale like mine did. I can't believe that she was so willing to help me and worked on a sliding scale. She was outstanding. I couldn't believe it. Okay, so let's end with some low cost but high impact tools that build emotional and mental health muscles. All right, so first up is name it to tame it. I've mentioned saying I'm overwhelmed out loud can take the edge off. So can talking to the emotion. You're acknowledging the emotion and lessening its power. I know it sounds silly, but this does work. Ask it what it wants, ask it what um, purpose it's serving. Just give it a try. Don't worry about how you look. If it's not your cup of tea, no problem. Don't forget about grounding exercises. You know, I've mentioned a million times about the 5-4-3-2-1 technique. This is a way to lessen your way um, out of an anxiety spiral. So let's talk about some unique grounding exercises in case you've missed that before. So you can hold ice in your hands. This will help bring you to the present. You can tap different parts of your body. This is a way to redirect anxious energy. Or you can play a category game like naming 5 different kinds of pasta or 5 different kinds of fruits, that kind of thing. Something else you can try is a feeling check-in. So just take a moment to do an emotional check-in. Ask yourself, what am I feeling right now? What do I need? And remember, don't get caught up in analyzing your feelings. This is something that I used to do. So that's why I caution you. Don't be like, why am I feeling this way? The why isn't as important as being able to acknowledge your emotion, move through it, and then, if necessary, redirect it. And you can do these feeling check-ins just, a few times a day and kind of help keep you, you can't see my hand, so why am I doing that? I'm doing like an ocean wave, but this could help keep you kind of in balance. And then something else is, instead of retreating, rest. So you're allowed to pause without quitting. There is no shame in taking a break, whether that's from work, chores, recovery work like your steps or your deep dives, reading, whatever it is. We need that mental step back, and you need to do it without guilt. And I'm going to say something that's probably going to upset some people, but I'm going to say it anyway. If your sponsor or your accountability partner tries to give you shit about taking a few days to mentally reset, find a new one. And I mean that wholeheartedly. I care not what anyone thinks about me saying that, because unpacking what we're going through is tough. We need empathy, not a guilt trip. So make sure that who you're working with is empathetic to you and not making you feel shame about working through trauma or grief or whatever it is you're going through. They need to be able to meet you where you are and understand that. And that's why I loved my last sponsor so much. She was the best. So I'm glad I stuck around to work through emotional sobriety with her, because I think that she was put there for me for that reason. So again, we need empathy, not a guilt trip. But again, make sure you get back in the groove of doing the work in a few days, because it's important that your rest doesn't turn into stagnation. Don't use you feeling overwhelmed as an excuse not to do the work, because that's no good for you either. It's a very delicate balance, but you can't just be like, well, it's scary and I don't want to do it. No, yes, it is scary, but we have to move through it. What's that saying? The only way to get through it is to move through it? That's not the same. I can't think of it right now. The only way to move through it is to get through it. I don't know. That's not it. And here's some journaling prompts if you want to have some. What emotion have I been avoiding either today or this week? Or how did I handle stress today? And how did it handle me? What changes do I need to make this week? What did I do great this week? What do I need to improve on next week? All right, so let's do a quick review. I know, right? What's quick about this podcast so far? Let's do a quick review on what we discussed. So we have a daily feelings check-in. So what emotion did I feel most today? How did I respond to it? What is helpful and what is harmful? We have a tiny wins tracker. So today I supported my emotional sobriety by, one thing I'm proud of today, or one moment I paused instead of reacting. You have a feeling journal prompt. Right now I need, or I usually avoid feeling blank, but today I noticed it when blank. And then you have a self-reflection, which is, what's one support I'd like to try this week? Or where can I go when I need to talk honestly? And then lastly, progress check at the end of each week. You can try that. Is what's one thing I learned about my emotional patterns this week, and what would I like to do differently next week? Okay, so remember, emotional sobriety, it's not like a destination. I guess it's like a relationship, and all relationships, you need to nurture them. And I will spare you the whole, garden. Is it simile? Yeah. But they do need attention and care. A little humor goes a long way. That's why I'm so snarky all the time. But seriously, what is one thing that you can do today would be great, that supports your emotional sobriety? Write it down, celebrate it, share it with me. I would love to know about it, because mental health awareness isn't just about having that diagnosis or treatment plans. It's really about that daily choice that we make when we show up for ourselves. Even when it's hard, actually, especially when it's hard, honestly. So yeah, if today's message resonated with you, I want you to know you are not alone. And you also don't have to do this alone. Find your people. There are people out there. You are not alone. Reach out, please. For deeper reflections, behind the scenes, insights like I talked about. I'm going to be sharing my adoption stuff. You can subscribe to my Substack. It's free. It's bookendsofrecovery.substack.com, and also exploring a free online chat space there, just for bookenders. If that sounds like something that would be your kind of thing, let me know. Head over to bookendsofrecovery.com and then just fill out the contact form. It's very confidential. You're not going to get any kind of emails, whatever. And then, of course, that's where you'll find free recovery worksheets and blog posts and all that fun stuff. And you can also find me on Facebook, Bookends of Addiction Recovery. As always, this is Laura, and I am sending you positive vibes. because you deserve them, my bookenders. And again, I appreciate you listening so much. Have a wonderful day.